To access the most complete listing of our C-SPAN 2 schedule, please call area code 202-628-2205.
Coming up next, as part of our coverage of Election 90, a debate between the Minnesota senatorial candidates. In that race, incumbent Republican Rudy Boschwitz is being challenged by Democratic Farmer Labor Party candidate Paul Wellstone.
Election Day is just 2 weeks from today, and one of the important matters voters will decide is whether to send Rudy Boschwitz back to Washington for a third six-year term or to replace him with Paul Wellstone. If you're unsure, we hope that today's broadcast will help you decide which candidate to support. Now, the format of the debate today is going to be a little different than what you probably come to expect from events like this. Today, there's no panel of reporters, nobody keeping track to the second of how long somebody speaks, no rules that are complex enough to be worthy of a bridge game. No, instead, it's just the candidates facing each other. This, I think, will seem a little bit more like an old-fashioned political debate. As the moderator, I will raise questions for a discussion from time to time, but I'm going to intervene and jump in only if both candidates are talking at the same time, if they're hopelessly stuck on one topic, or if somebody decides to practice his filibustering skills. There is one little bit of structure. Each candidate will be allowed a minute and a half to make a closing statement, and we will get to those closing statements at the end. Paul Wellstone won the coin toss, and Rudy Boschwitz will give the closing statement first when we get down to that point. And depending on how things go, we may or may not take a few listener questions for the last 20 or 25 minutes. We'll see how it goes. Paul Wellstone is with me here at NPR Studios in St. Paul. Paul, thanks for coming in.
Oh, it's good to be here, Bob. Thanks for having the debate.
And Senator Boschwitz is with us by satellite from Washington. Rudy, can you hear us all right?
Yes, I can, Bob, and I also thank you for setting it up in this way. A number of my colleagues here in the Senate are doing these long-distance debates now because of our session. Matter of fact, yesterday, Senator Simpson did one with his opponent, and on both sides of the aisle, we're kind of doing these long-distance debates. We're supposed to get out here by Wednesday night, which is tomorrow night, but now that doesn't look very current anymore. I would imagine we won't get out till the weekend, if then. I hope that the president doesn't sign another continuing resolution, but I hope we just shut her down, because only by creating a crisis are we finally going to come to grips with it.
I think that the crisis will be real unfortunate for a lot of people's lives, and Rudy, I don't think that we needed to be in this mess. I thought several weeks ago there looked like there was going to be an agreement, and you and the gang of well, let me just finish, and then
yes,
and then you can respond. You and the gang of 16 other senators went in, and you told the president, don't raise the tax rates for wealthy people, for the top 1%. And I think that it's come to the point in the history of our country where people are just really tired of it. Middle and working people really being squeezed, and people on the top getting off like bandits, and the poor. So I don't think you should talk as if this crisis is something sort of separate from the role that you've played, and I think people are real tired of it.
Paul,
go ahead, it's your turn now.
Thank you very much. Paul, you opposed that agreement, And now you apparently like the agreement. As a matter of fact, I thought that agreement was better and better. The more that they negotiate, the worse it gets. You were not at that meeting with the president. What we told the president is, stick with the tax rates, throw out the capital gains rates, and just move forward, because those were the sticking points at that point of time. But now, please don't say that the income tax system of this country is unfair. I thought that we had debated that in the last debate. As you know, the top 5% of all taxpayers pay 45.9% of all the income taxes. The top 10% of all taxpayers pay 57% of all income taxes in this country. The income tax system in this country is fair. After the 1986 tax bill, you have read no articles about paying more taxes than GE. You've read no articles about the rich escaping taxation. They do not escape taxation. We closed all the loopholes. People of America should understand that the tax system is fair. The income tax system really does nick the wealthy, and in a fair way.
All right, Paul Wellstone, a quick response.
Well, I just really like this format because this gives me an opportunity to respond, and for Rudy and I to talk about places where we really disagree, and so people know the differences.
Give me the figures.
Excuse me now, Rudy, I listened to you. Please give me the courtesy of letting me respond. What people have read about during this last 5 years and really throughout this whole decade is a massive redistribution of wealth and income up the income scale. You keep citing these figures as if it should be some surprise. It's not surprising that people on the top, percentage-wise, in terms of the income taxes they pay more. I mean, why would it surprise you, for example, that I, Paul Wellstone, a teacher with my salary at 28%, why would it surprise you that at 28% I pay less than what you pay at a higher rate? I mean, 28%, for example, let me kind of give it to you this way. It's the best way. 28% of your $1 million is more than 33% of my income. So I don't understand your argument. Of course people pay the top percentage-wise more. The real issue is rate. Since there's much more wealth and income at the top, and since people on the top have not paid their fair share, most of us, the vast majority of Minnesotans, believe it's fair and we believe it's equitable that millionaires can pay a surtax and that people with incomes over $200,000 a year, top 1%, couples, can pay at a 33% level. That's fair and that's reasonable. Why you keep citing these figures is a surprise to me. Of course, 28% of your $1 million is more than 33% of my middle income salary.
All right, let's hear what Rudy has to say about this, and maybe we move on to another topic.
I wish I had $1 million income that he always talks about. Let me again, I'm sorry that I have to repeat so often. My opponent's a professor, but apparently needs repetition here. The top 5% of all taxpayers pay 45%, a little more, of all income taxes in this country. The bottom 50% of all taxpayers in this country pay about a nickel of every dollar that we receive in income taxes. The income tax distribution in this country is fair. We have made it fairer through the 1986 tax bill.
Let me
ask
this.
Can I just add one thing, Bob? Could
very,
I just
very quickly?
Well, I may want to add a thing.
Yeah, I know. We may want to
go on and on and on, around and around.
I think it does bear some repetition one more time. The wealth and the income has all moved to the top. Not surprising, the top 5% pays more proportionally.
Yeah,
the issue is one of fairness. There's no progressivity, and there's no reason why millionaires in the top 1%, Bob, given this mess, the people who have the wealth and income should not pay their fair share. That's the first point. The second point about this budget mess, you know, and Rudy has played a central role in this, is from the very beginning, I said it was a clear choice. Rudy has talked about cutting Medicare benefits. He's talked about cutting student aid. He's talked about cutting target prices and vet benefits. And I say we don't cut Medicare. What we do is make sure that once and for all, we have a fair tax system with people on the top paying their fair share. Why is that so difficult for you to accept and fight for? Don't the little people once and for all need somebody at the bargaining table for them in the Senate?
That really is a lot of political rhetoric. the programs of this country, all of the programs have grown too rapidly. The result is we have the deficit. Perhaps my opponent thinks that we're taxing too little. I don't think we're taxing too little. I think we're spending too much. And if you're going to rein in some of the programs, if you're not going to rein them in, you're never going to balance the budget. So that there should be some tax increases. That's the only way we're going to get votes from the Democrats. Yes, you're going to have some spending decreases, and then we'll get 51 votes in the Senate, and then we will pass some kind of a budget resolution. I have voted for them. I probably will vote for the one that they are putting together now, though I like it less and less. And we do have to get on with the budget. And we do have to get on with the business of governing this nation. We're not showering ourselves in glory right now, that's for sure.
Well, listening to a live debate between Senator Rudy Boschwitz and his DFL opponent, Paul Wellstone. Senator Boschwitz live with us by satellite from Washington, and Mr. Wellstone here in our St. Paul studios. Let me just, we can come back to the budget if you guys like a little bit later on, but let's move on to another topic. But I have not heard you, either of you, talk about a great deal in your earlier debate, and that is defense. Not so much what we might be spending on right now, but what are our defense needs in a new era in light of the realities of the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe? Big countries like the Soviet Union, frankly, don't seem to be as much of a threat as they once were, whereas little ones like Iraq are just terrible threats to us.
Right.
Paul, why don't you start?
I think that's one of the things that's puzzling about what's going on right now in the nation's capital, and it really is related to this budget question. You know, Rudy was talking about how we need to freeze programs and we spend too much on programs. Everybody I talk to in cafes knows that taxes are going to go up. They just want to make sure that this time it's not out of middle and working people, and that we don't cut programs that are important for people. We've tried to manage the business of this country on the basis of voodoo economics, and we've built up enormous debt. And I think one of the things that I can't forgive Rudy for is this enormous debt that we're saddled with, so that we can't even do decent things anymore for people in our country.
But
and the
what
Pentagon
kind of
budget
defense?
and the Pentagon budget really is part of what needs to be debated. We now have slated $77 billion over the next 5 years, Bob, for modernization of conventional forces in Europe, preparing for a war that's never going to be fought against Czechoslovakia, Poland, or the Soviet Union. We don't need to spend that money. We now have big ticket items still that Rudy supports, like the B-2 stealth bomber MX, destabilizing weaponry, not needed, preparing for nuclear war, not going to take place. So what we need to do is redefine our national security, understand the Cold War is over. The world has changed. It's not the 80s any longer. It's 1990. Be strong so that we can respond where we need to respond in parts of the world, but not go forward with wasteful Pentagon weaponry. That's a big difference. Rudy wants to continue to support the stealth, and I want to put some of that money into child care and health care and education.
Rudy, what kind of defense do we need here in the 90s?
Well, it's not clear to me what the figures are. Perhaps Paul can give us the figures that he expects to save with respect to the budget through his plan. He outlined the plan, but what's that going to save in dollars and cents?
$40 billion a year over the next 5 years. That's $200 billion. Should be cut from the Pentagon, and we'll still have a strong, strong defense. I joined 2 former secretaries of defense in agreement on that, as well as the fine work of William Kaufman at the Brookings Institute. You have all those figures before you. You know those are reasonable cuts.
As you may know, we have agreed to $170 billion of cuts in the next 5 years. That's part of the package. That's a part of the package that nobody really disagrees with. It's the figure that came from a number of people, including Senator Sam Nunn, who's chairman of the Armed Services Committee and who's respected and for good cause. And so that there is not much distinction there. But nevertheless, the B-2 is going to continue. The B-2, as I mentioned in our last debate, Paul, you know, the B-2 is technology. The SDI is technology. That is our real advantage over the Russians. That is what has driven them to the bargaining table. That is what has allowed us to eliminate a whole series of nuclear weapons that has never been achieved before, but that was achieved during President Reagan's tenure in office. We really are making some progress, but we need to modernize. We need to be a step ahead in technology. That is the American advantage. And if we are a step ahead, we will indeed be able to drive the Russians to the bargaining table. That's been our entire experience. That is why I am for some of those high-tech weapons. For instance, with the B-2 bomber that you mentioned, as you may know, the Russians have spent $350 to $400 billion in air defense systems. Their countryside bristles with SAM missiles, surface-to-air missiles. They have huge radar systems throughout their country to track incoming bombers, to track incoming type of missilery. The B-2 bomber makes it all obsolete. They cannot replace it. Their economy is indeed in a shambles. Threats are very, very much different. But yet they are undertaking modernization, Paul, as you may know, of their nuclear forces. Those are going on unabated, that modernization program. So we just have to be on our guard, and we have to be skillful, and we have to be on defense. As George Washington and every other thoughtful person has said, if you want peace, you must prepare for war. Because history speaks with a very single voice. A strong nation is not attacked. A strong nation can keep the peace.
Well, this is the language that we hear from the Pentagon. Rudy, as you may know, throughout this whole decade of the 80s, I have done quite a bit of writing about Pentagon issues. We have never really agreed on this new technology. SDI, Star Wars, was an impossible dream. It's not there to provide an umbrella for us. It does not provide us protection from a Soviet attack. You know that, and everybody who's done any independent study of it knows that. Second of all, on stealth bomber, I'm all for a strong defense, but what people are sick of in Minnesota is these boondoggles. That's a weapon system without a mission. You talk as if, when you talk about Gorbachev and the Soviet Union, it's like you and I see two different worlds. Gorbachev wants a moratorium on any further testing of nuclear weapons. Gorbachev wants major arms agreements, strategic arms and conventional forces. Gorbachev wants to move forward, and we ought to be doing everything we can to bring about that kind of new world. And for you to continue to talk about these new technologies, and we need more weaponry, we have 25,000 bombs, I think shows how out of touch you are with what people in Minnesota believe is our real national security, which is let's spend some of that money not preparing for war in Europe. Let the Europeans defend themselves. They can do that. They can build up their own forces. They have the economies. Let's invest some money in our children. Let's invest some money in education. Let's invest some money in healthcare, and let's invest some money in economic performance. I think you've got to understand that that's the real national security of our country. People don't want to go forward with insane arms race, and that's a big difference between the two of us.
All right. Rudy,
well,
any final response on this?
Yes.
I've got another question.
Oh, okay, fine. I certainly want to go forward with education and child care and things like that, and I don't think that these things are mutually exclusive. You cited Mr. Gorbachev a number of times. You know, I'm a jogger, a runner, and I used to meet Bill Proxmire every morning in the gym, and we'd shower together and chat together, and he taught to me in about the same vein and wanted to show me all these studies of how the SDI can't work. I don't think that they all show by any means that it can't work, quite to the contrary. But, and then he would want to show me polls of scientists, and I said, Prox, I've taken my own poll. It's just one guy. It's the guy that you talk about, Paul. It's Gorbachev. He's wild about the SDI. In the 80s, that's all he wanted to talk to President Reagan about, that you had to stop the SDI or we won't even talk to you. He certainly believed it works, and I agree with Mr. Gorbachev in this regard. They can't defend against it. They don't know how to defend against it. That's what drives them to the bargaining table. I might say it's a very small program. It's a program that accounts for just over 1% of the defense budget, and it's a program that we should not abandon. Technology is the American advantage in many things, including defense.
Well, you should know, Rudy, one of the committees that I want to serve on is the Senate Armed Services Committee, and, you know, being in Washington all this time, you should know that what Gorbachev was saying about SDI was not that he thought SDI was going to be a dome over us, protecting us from any attack. What looked defensive to us looked offensive to him. Knowing full well that their offensive weaponry could overwhelm SDI, what Gorbachev was worried about was that military planners in his country would see SDI as a way where we might launch a first strike, and then with what they have left, SDI might be able to handle that. So that's the whole problem. It's wasteful, it's unnecessary, it's destabilizing. The Cold War is over. Why don't we talk about major arms agreements? And on stealth...
Well, we are
Wait, let me finish. I did listen. I did sort of listen to what you said, and I think what you said was important. I think people need to know the differences between the two of us. You said that education and child care and all of this is not mutually exclusive. You know, it's getting down to some choices. It's getting down to some choices. And once again, either you're going to raise tax rates, 33% is not considered to be high in any other advanced economy in the world for high-income people, and you're going to cut unnecessary weaponry like the stealth, or you're going to do what you propose, cut Medicare benefits. I think there are choices that have to be made, and you don't understand that.
All right, can we move on to another topic, assuming
wait, you know, I don't know who should have the last word.
All right, well, I think Paul had the first word on this one. We'll let you have the last word, and then we'll move on, okay?
Absolutely.
Paul, you have a basic misunderstanding about the Strategic Defense Initiative. Note the name. It's a defense initiative. It is not an offense initiative. We're not going to put any missiles up in the sky. That's not part of the Strategic Defense Initiative. It's a program that has just stymied the Russians. And when you have them on the defensive, man, you don't stop one of your best programs that has the opposition coming your way. So I think
I do understand. Rudy, I don't think you listened to me. I've written about this. I know these issues well.
We're done.
And that's why I want to serve on that committee.
Let's stop on this topic. See if you guys come to any closer meeting of the minds on the topic of civil rights legislation. As I understand, Rudy, the Senate might make an attempt to override the president's veto on that bill, which he vetoed yesterday. You voted against the bill. I assume you will vote to sustain the president's veto. What kind of civil rights legislation do you think we need, if any, for the 1990s?
Well, the question is that whether or not this civil rights bill should be passed. And we are now studying, they are still negotiating it, I might say, even as we sit here and speak, so that it's not entirely clear yet what we are going to be voting upon. But quite clearly, the bill that we voted against in the first time, it was somewhat improved, I might say, in the second pass. But the vote that we cast the first time was a vote that clearly would require quotas. And I'm against quotas. I mean, I've been the subject of quotas. All my life I've been against them, and quite clearly this was not a civil rights bill in the first pass. And it's improving, so we'll see what it finally comes down to when we vote on it, and that may be as early as this afternoon.
Paul Wellstone, what civil rights legislation do we need?
You know, I can't believe not too long ago Rudy Boschwitz compared himself to Hubert Humphrey. Hubert Humphrey would be twisting and turning in his grave to know that a Minnesota senator has voted against a major piece of civil rights legislation. That legislation doesn't call for quotas, and Rudy knows that. That legislation provides people of color and women and people.
What do you mean I know that?
Excuse me, Bob, I'd like to insist. I don't know how you all do it in Washington, Rudy, but in Minnesota we're courteous to each other.
You can't all talk at once. That much I do know.
I believe I let you answer, and I think it's now my turn. I would appreciate the courtesy.
Please don't say what I know and what I don't know.
Okay, well, you'll have a chance to respond.
Go right ahead.
Okay. You need to remain calm and cool. What I was saying is that he has to let me respond. Bob, talk to him, will you?
Just keep talking, Paul. Okay. He's quiet.
Rudy, again, it's not a Minnesota vote. This would have provided people of color and women and people with disabilities an opportunity for redress of grievances when discriminated against in employment. This was not a quota bill. Rudy talked about being subject to quotas. I'm Jewish. We're both Jewish. Jewish people worry about quotas, but the Jewish community was united in behalf of this bill. The Jewish community was right there with the Conference on Civil Rights lobbying for this bill. And I think it's really shameful that Rudy Boschwitz has opposed a major piece of civil rights legislation. It only gives encouragement to the skinheads and to the Klansmen and to people who discriminate. And I think it was a terrible vote.
Okay, Rudy,
Well-
your turn if you want.
Well, since you cite Hubert Humphrey used to brag that he never voted against a defense bill. And he indeed had a great and strong sense of what a strong defense meant. The Jewish community was not united in support of this particular piece of legislation, as it normally isn't. There are always divisions in most communities. There's no question that if you look at it, and I have interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people as a businessman, and if you look at the records that small businesses and large businesses alike are required to keep under this bill, if you look at the burden of proof that is required under this bill, if you look, it's a lawyer's relief bill. If you look at the ability to sue that comes under this bill, there's no question about the fact that employers will begin to hire as though there are quotas. And that is something that we do not want in our society. So that's why I have voted against the bill. The first two passes. Now it is still being negotiated. And my vote on this is quite important, so that I'll go back after this debate to see how those negotiations are proceeding. But there really has not been unanimity on this issue at all. It's not clear to me that this would really advance the cause of civil rights.
It's interesting how it's clear to every member organization, the civil rights, if you will, family in this country. It's clear to me that this art. I again will have to ask you to please be courteous. This argument about quotas, Bob, I hope the people get a chance to read this legislation, this bill that Rudy Boschwitz voted against. Don't talk about quotas. This is the same argument Ronald Reagan made against civil rights legislation. It is not about quotas. It's about making sure that there's not discrimination in employment. And I think citizens in this country have a right to that. And I think 99.99% of the Minnesotans believe in that with me. And when Rudy mentioned Hubert Humphrey and defense, I got to tell you something, Rudy. I'm for strong defense. I'm just not for wasteful weaponry. I know Hubert Humphrey would be with me on that. And number two, Hubert Humphrey would never, never, never vote for cuts in the Medicare program. Don't you be citing Hubert Humphrey as your ally here.
We come back a little bit to the budget argument. All right, Rudy, do you want to have a comment on that?
Sure. Let me conclude the whole business of the Civil Rights Bill. We tried to get the Senate to accept the civil rights bill that we have in Minnesota. The Minnesota legislature passed a civil rights bill that really was a good deal fairer, that didn't shift the burden of proof from one side to the other so rapidly, that didn't impose itself upon reasonable sized or small employers with the same rigidity that it does upon large employers that have far better record keeping on their employment system. And listen, in the event that there are any changes in Medicare, Paul, down here, it's going to be a bipartisan thing. It's going to be Republicans and Democrats alike. Medicare in 1980 was a $32 billion program. In 1990, it'll be $106 billion, almost a 333% increase, almost 3 1/3 times as large. And you know, if you you know, if you want to balance the budget, you just have to slow the growth. It's not a matter of making cuts. Nobody's going to get less than last year. The question is, are you going to slow the growth? And I think we have to slow the growth of all federal programs. Otherwise, we'll never balance the budget.
Paul, again, I wonder if you'd respond to that.
You bet. You know, first of all,
on slowing the growth of Medicare.
On slowing the growth of Medicare, and I noticed that all programs, some people are very generous with the suffering of other people. What Rudy didn't talk about was the mild and not so mild inflation of medical costs. What Rudy didn't talk about was the fact that for elderly people, prescription drug costs can be over $200 a month, not covered at all. What Rudy didn't talk about was the catastrophic nursing home expenses, not covered at all. What Rudy didn't talk about was a deductible that goes up from 75 to 150 or whatever a year. Now, again, I said this to you before. Maybe that's what you spend in lunch in Washington, D.C., but that is a big, big expenditure item for people who are having a difficult time of it. That's number one. Number two, I feel strongly about this, having taken care of my parents and knowing what they've gone through. This is a sacred trust. This is a decision that we made as a people. that we made a commitment to a Medicare program and not to be cutting it. And number three, when Rudy says we have to have cuts across the board, how convenient this is. There you are with Ronald Reagan. You're cutting nutrition programs. You're cutting child care programs. You're cutting education programs. You're spending money on all the Pentagon weaponry, even weaponry you don't need. You're cutting taxes for the wealthy, but it goes up for middle and working people. And now you want to freeze everything and cut everything. The difference between the two of us is I don't put the same value to cutting stealth B-2 bomber as opposed to cutting a nutrition program for children or Head Start for children. Well, that is a shotgun approach to the government. That's a shotgun approach to governing. That's a shotgun approach to the budget. And the sooner the people from Minnesota get somebody in there with some standard of fairness to fight for people and not just people who are wealthy, the better off I think we'll be.
Well, to say that I'm fighting just for people that are wealthy is really political rhetoric. Which nutrition program do you have in mind that we have cut, Paul?
Let me just go over some of the different votes, if you will, over the years, okay?
Well, no, not the votes. Which nutrition programs have we cut in the 1980s? I mean, the school lunch program doubled during the 1980s. The child care feeding program, which I have overseen, has doubled even more in the 1980s. The food stamp program, which did not double in the 1980s, but which is more related to unemployment, but went from $9 to $16 billion. The feeding programs, nutrition programs in this country, and I am the ranking Republican, the senior Republican on the Nutrition Committee, a subcommittee of the Agriculture Committee, they did not go down. The Head Start program,
1986.
The Head Start program that you spoke about has gone up very nicely in the 1980s, almost doubled, and as a matter of fact, this president has called for a $500 million increase in it this year. I agree with you, I might say, about the inflation in medical costs, that is the real problem. The deductible that you speak about, that we are talking about raising, that is now $75 a year for people under Medicare, has not been raised for 15 years. When Medicare was founded 25 years ago, that deductible was $50. It is not unfair to raise it to some degree in order to prevent overuse of the system and in order to bring this program under some kind of control. The largest outstanding economic problem we have in this country is the budget.
This is a live debate between Senator Rudy Boschwitz and DFL challenger Paul Wellstone.
My turn now, Bob? My turn now?
I haven't completed.
Oh, you haven't finished?
Completed.
Okay, now listen, you filibuster in the Senate. Now, don't filibuster me in this debate, Rudy.
The Medicare program, again, is not going to be cut. These programs are not going to be cut. They're going to be slowed in growth. Medicare has been growing at about 12 or 13% a year. Let it grow at 9% a year. Defense is going down in the 1990s, and it should. But programs, in actual numbers, it will go down. And it should.
Let's hear from Paul for just a moment, if we can.
You bet.
I'd like
a little slower.
You know, the one thing that I have really liked about the Senate race, at least for my part, is to focus on the votes and the record. Rudy said any votes. 1986 voted against the $200 million increase over 3 years for WIC, that's Women, Infant, and Children, child immunization, and community mental health centers. That's 1986. Let me give you some other votes. 1990 voted against transfer of $100 million. Was that too much? From the Department of Defense to a new program for drug-addicted mothers and their children. 1989 voted against the ABC child care bill, which would have also allocated money for Head Start. And I could go on and on. There's just awful votes against the minimum wage, against increased money for education for children. And as far as what you're saying about Head Start, again, this is happy talk. You know, we have a great country, and Minnesota is a particularly great state, and we care about people. But when you talk about an increase in appropriations for Head Start or WIC, that's fine. But we have to talk about not an increase of appropriations. This is statistics. You need to be there with people to know what's happening. The Head Start program is reaching only 1 out of 4 eligible children. The WIC program is only serving about a quarter of children who are eligible. And in case you didn't notice it, Rudy, in our state there was a study done by the Urban Coalition that something like a third of the children from low-income households in Hennepin County are going to school hungry. No, I'm sorry. I can't let you get away with this. I really can't. This is a bunch of Boschwitz. I mean, that's what this is when you try and tell all of us here that there's been all these great things done for child care, all these great things done for investment in education and children. It has not happened. We've abandoned our children during this decade of the 80s, and we're not going to have real security until we invest in our children. And that's a big difference between the two of us.
Well,
okay, Rudy, do you have
let me talk child immunization. Paul spoke about. Programs in child immunization went from 24 million to 140 million in the 1980s. The WIC program started in 1980 at 772 million. It's now over 2.4 billion. It has more than tripled during the 1980s. Did I vote against some of these things?
Yes.
Sure, I voted against them. But you know, when you have a general appropriations bill come up that funds, let's say, WIC, somebody always comes with an amendment and wants more. And even though in the bill you are giving WIC program, let's say, or Head Start or some other program, you're giving them considerably more. We make a lot of political votes. We offer a lot of political amendments down here. And they want to get people on the record voting against so that the Paul Wellstones of the world can say in a campaign that you voted against something. But the very bills that you're speaking about undoubtedly increase spendings on those programs. But when they want more, you just have to have some budgetary discipline down here. You can't be for balancing the budget and also for increasing every program without limits.
Let's move on.
Bob, I need
Paul,
to respond.
Really like
I just have to respond very quickly.
Well, I
okay?
will respond
because
again, Bob.
I think...
And that'll be it. We'll hear from you, then we'll hear from
okay.
Paul, or rather from Rudy, then on to another topic for sure, okay?
On we go.
Quickly.
Yeah. First of all, Rudy asked for some votes, and I cited him. He says now he didn't vote for all of it, but he voted for some of the additional funding. These were major appropriations votes.
That's right.
And those votes against, now it's my turn, those votes against programs that would make sure that children would have a chance were mean-spirited votes. Now, when we want to talk about fiscal responsibility, this is the difference again. I don't want to balance a budget now, nor would I have done it during this decade of the 80s on the backs of children, or on the backs of Medicare recipients, or on the backs of young people trying to get a college education. What I would have done, and what I will do, and it's a big difference between the two of us, is I will not have regressive taxes. I will not see middle-income people and working people paid more, but I will see the people on the top paying more for a change. And if you don't do that, and you're unwilling to do that, Rudy, and you're not willing to cut wasteful Pentagon spending, then we won't balance the budget. You can't really lecture me about balancing the budget. You were in Washington, D.C. while we went from, what, $970 billion to over $3 trillion of debt. You've been there. You've been on the Budget Committee. You're the one that takes responsibility. I want to change it.
Okay, Rudy, a quick comment, then we can have another topic.
Certainly the votes were not mean-spirited. There does have to be some discipline. The college programs I thought we talked about last time, Paul, and you will recall that the GSL loans, the guaranteed student loans, have more than doubled in the 1980s. As I recall the figures, they went from $1.7 billion to $3.9 billion. The Pell Grants went from $2.6 billion to $4.6 billion, as I recall, almost a doubling. And we really have tried to do the right things. There's a balance to governing. There's no question about that. And I'm sure that we approach things in different ways. But I believe that we have tried to do the right thing, and that by and large we have. I don't believe that taxation in the United States is unfair or regressive. I think that the tax system, the income tax system of the United States, is very fair indeed.
Stop. We'll move on to another subject now. This is a live debate between Paul Wellstone and Rudy Boschwitz. Paul Wellstone is at Minnesota Public Radio Studios in St. Paul, and Senator Boschwitz is live by satellite from Washington. We just saw the Congress wrap up work to a great extent on clean air legislation, and I'd like to have both of your feelings on whether you think the proper balance was struck in this bill between economic growth and environmental quality, or if it has been tipped too far one side or the other. Let's start with Rudy out in Washington.
Not bad. And we just concluded the conference very late not last night, but the night before, and it hasn't been printed up, so we haven't been able to read it. I expect we will be voting on it also fairly immediately, and it was not a bad bill. I think I was helpful in putting that bill together and shepherding it through, and it was also important to Minnesota that we get certain concessions, and so it's a well-balanced bill. I think that Senator Durenberger, who was more active in it, he's on that committee than I, also thinks that way.
Paul?
Well, there's much that could be improved with that bill, for sure. There could be more of a focus on conservation. There could be stricter tailpipe emissions. There could be higher fuel efficiency standards. There could be more incentives for ethanol alternatives. But we got a compromise bill. But it's no thanks to Rudy Boschwitz. David Durenberger was a real leader. Jerry Sikorsky was a real leader. I think the thing that bothers me the most about Rudy's politics is the sort of running ads that sort of really don't represent voting record. With this clean air bill, Rudy Boschwitz, first of all, introduced the amendment that would have essentially not had strong regulation on air toxics. He wanted to gut that. His amendment was defeated. Now in Minnesota, we love our lakes and rivers and streams. And now women of childbearing age, Bob, and young children are told they're not to be able to eat that fish because of air toxics. Mercury poison and whatnot carried thousands of miles away. You have the senator from Minnesota who introduces a late-night amendment to gut that part. Then he comes out here and says he's been a leader and an honest broker for a darn good bill, then goes back and votes 3 times for the Nicholas Heflin amendment, which would have gutted the enforcement bill. That's why the environmental organizations across the board, Sierra Club, League of Conservation Voters, Clean Water Action, support me and strongly endorse me. This is the worst kind of politics. To tell the people here you've been a leader and you've done a good job, and then to go back in Washington, D.C. and vote against it. And one thing that I find really interesting when we talk about the environment, and I think this is so telling. I remember when Rudy met, because I came the next day with a group of farmers down in Mankato, and he told the farmers to organize or the environmentalists will roll you over, Bob. And then he called the environmentalists a bunch of Sierra Club types who live in the city and drink water from reservoirs or something like that. That's not the comment of an environmentalist. When you get all your money when you get so much money from the oil companies, the Exxons and the Chevrons, and you get the money from the chemical companies, and you get the money from the big auto companies, it's very difficult to be there fighting for the environment. Rudy Boschwitz has a very dismal record. Last point, if you go through the 80s, the only time he had a decent scorecard was 83, 84 re-election. The rest of his ratings from the League of Conservation Voters were 40, 50%, and I'm a teacher, and that grade is a failure.
He certainly spends a lot of time telling you what's wrong with me. I hope in his next answer he'll tell you what he intends to do. Now, the amendment that he speaks about that I introduced, which was a small business amendment, was indeed put into the final bill, and it was lauded by the environmental community. It was agreed to by the environmental community, even though they originally objected to it. But I felt that small businesses, dry cleaners, service stations, others who will be affected by this bill and who will not be in a position to deal with the technology that is necessary to clean up the air of their own operations should receive some help from the government. And that's really the amendment that was put into the bill, and that was accepted by one and all and is now part of the bill. Stricter tailpipe emissions. As you may know, I voted for that. We had the so-called Bryan bill here before us. That was not in the bill because the Democratic chairman of the Commerce Committee in the House of Representatives, Mr. Dingell, kept it out of the bill. The Nichols-Heflin amendment, I think, was finally worked out pretty well. That it would not make, if you've ever dealt with the Fish and Wildlife people, with the DNR, with the EPA and others, you know that the requirements of paper, the requirements of the bureaucracy are enormous. This was an effort to lower that. And I think that in the final bill, because of the Nichols-Heflin amendment, Nichols is a Republican and Heflin is a Democrat, so it was a bipartisan approach, that part of the bill was made better as well. Let me make one final comment about the alleged remarks that I made about to the farmers. I said to the farmers that they are indeed the environmentalists, the basic environmentalists. It's their land. And I said that they want clean water even more than the people in the cities. The cities do indeed drink waters largely from reservoirs. The farmers have to drink water from wells. Those are the things that are being polluted. Those were my comments, and that is what I said in Mankato and in other places.
I'd like to respond, because the way we go, Bob, I think it was Rudy started, and then I responded, and then he responded. The Mankato Free Press took Rudy Boschwitz to task for that. What I said, he said, he said. Actually, it was an effort to get farmers to organize against environmentalists. I think we have to have people working together. My son and his wife farm, and I have lived in farm rural community all my time here in Minnesota and have traveled around the state, and I think farmers and rural people care every bit as much about the environment. I have to tell you that what Rudy does to the history of this legislation is amazing. The small businesses that would have been exempted in this amendment were businesses like Bethlehem Steel, Uniroyal Chemical, and DuPont. They don't sound like small businesses, and I guess, Rudy, here's what it boils down to. This is a state where people feel strongly about the environment. And they want to have a senator, and David Durberger has shown this leadership, who will be a strong advocate for the environment. If you've done so well, why do you have such a low scorecard, such a low voting record by the major environmental organizations? Why? Can you explain that?
Well, let me first say that the amendment, you're incorrect. It would not have applied to Uniroyal or Bethlehem Steel or DuPont.
I'm correct, but let's go on.
Bob, it was my amendment, but he knows it better than I do.
I do.
It would
what
not
can I say? They don't agree on anything.
That's too bad. It would not have applied to them. If you look at my environmental rating with the various organizations, you will see that in the energy part, I rated quite high. I think it's 77%. In the pollution part, I also rated quite high, 73, 74%. In the resources part, I did rate low. But, you know, for instance, now they are going to rate us once again on forest roads. And they rated us last year on 2 of the 12 votes were on forest roads. And mind you, they take 12 votes out of many hundreds, and then they rate you. If we spend less in this country on forest roads, we recognize that the first roads that won't be built will be in northern Minnesota, because our forests up there are not particularly productive. And yet in northern Minnesota, where I must say most of the folks are Democrats, but yet they have to work. Most of the new jobs that are being created, the most vibrant industry up there is the wood products industry. I can't vote against my own state. And so sometimes in resources I have been low. But those are Minnesota kind of votes.
Let's move on to another subject. Paul, please, let's move on. Can we?
Just real quickly, that.
One second now, Bob.
Okay,
I'd like to move on. I really would, because we're getting down near the end here, and we are going to get to closing statements.
So frustrating.
One final question, though, which I'd like to put to each of you, and that is whether you think U.S. industries are well prepared as they can be and should be to compete internationally, and what you think government should do or not do to help foster that competition. Paul, I'll start with you.
It gets back to real national security. We have not had the economic performance in this country. We were talking about the environment, Bob. The EPA's research budget is 1% of the Pentagon's research budget. How are we going to invest in new clean technologies, our big growth industry? Japanese are serious about that. Europeans are serious about it. We're not. We're missing out in new emerging technologies, telecommunications. We've been beat in fiber optics, in auto, in steel, in electronics, machine tools. It's been paper entrepreneurship. It's not been productive investment. And there's a whole class of citizens who've been left completely out of the economy. I think one of the real scandals, and I said this earlier, it's one of the things I cannot forgive Rudy for in terms of this mess in Washington and what's happened during the 80s, is that we have gotten ourselves into so much debt that we no longer are capable of investing in ourselves. It's such a good question you ask. It's not just a budget deficit. It's more than that. It's an investment deficit. And it's even more than that, Bob. It's a spiritual deficit. We're not investing in human capital. We're not investing in physical infrastructure. And we don't have real good, strong, credible capital investment. And that's why good many people in the business community say to me that what I'm talking about in terms of the 90s, it's 1990, and getting away from this mess in the 80s is absolutely the direction we need to go in.
Rudy Boschwitz.
Well, I'm not sure that I feel that this country is beaten out in quite the way that my opponent does. I'm not quite so sure that I think the 80s were such a dismal failure. In the 1980s, we had 7.5 years of economic growth unabated. It was the longest period of economic growth that this nation has ever had. During the 1980s, we have seen countries all over the world follow our system, come to our system, because it's fairer to people in all levels of society. So that I'm not sure that we're beaten out and that we've been beaten to a pulp, as Paul will have you think. However, I think we do have to do more in the tax law, and we're not doing it in this budget package, with respect to stimulus to investment. I know that Paul probably opposes the capital gains tax lowering. I know that he may oppose research and development tax credits. But those are the kind of things that we have to do if we're going to get the investment in this country. And indeed, we have to bring down the budget deficit. In this regard, I certainly agree with him that too much of the monies that we develop in this country and in the world are invested into our deficit. And we have to slow the growth of government spending. Paul would criticizes me because I vote that way sometimes. I vote that way a whole lot. You got to slow the growth of government spending. You just can't raise taxes in order to balance the budget. So I don't think that we're beaten in this country at all. And I think that the 90s should be a continuation of strong economic growth.
The closing statements will be coming up in just a second.
This sounds just like, I have to tell you, Bob, this sounds like, what did we hear in '84 from Rudy? The best is yet to come. This sounds like Ronald Reagan talk. Everything's fine. This is a great country, and it's a great state. We can do much better. But I'll tell you something. People don't go for this talk from Washington, D.C. any longer, that everything is just fine. Not when we've built up all of this debt. Everything's just fine. Not when we're not investing in children. Everything's just fine. That discussion on the environment, where we have really wasted the environment, all of this has happened, and it has to change. That's the difference between the two of us. I think we need major changes in our state, and we won't have them unless people in Minnesota have somebody in the Senate that will fight for them and things they believe in. And things aren't so great. No, Rudy, we disagree on that. It's not so cheerful. We have a great country, but we can do much better.
Rudy,
well,
if you
Bob,
want the final word on this one, okay.
Bob, okay. I'm a great optimist, and I do believe in the future, and I really do believe that the best is yet to come. I don't say by any means that everything is perfect, but if you look around the world and look at America and look at other countries and look where we are, I think that we shouldn't be satisfied. We want to do more. I mean, that's Rudy Boschwitz.
Fine.
I always like to do more, always like to achieve more.
I have one final question. Yes.
I don't think you should be so downbeat on America. Everything is not so terrible.
One final question, which is going to require a pretty brief answer from each of you, so we have time for the closing statements.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit off the wall, but what the heck, you know. The election really has been dominated by the governor's race in Minnesota this year, and I'd sure like each of you to assess the impact it's having on your campaign. There has been a new poll showing that John Grunseth cannot win. Some Republican legislators say that he's hurting the IR legislative effort. Rudy, do you think it's time to ask Grunseth to get off the ticket?
Well, you know, I've been talking right along to Grunseth. The whole political year in Minnesota really has been quite unseemly. Not just the last few weeks, but weeks before that, and also through the spring and summer. I'm going to duck you a little bit about whether or not he should go off the ticket, but something like that could well happen. There's no question that if it's a three-man race, two of them are Republicans, we're disadvantaged, and so that let's just wait a little bit.
Paul, what impact has the Republican gubernatorial race had on your campaign?
That sounds kind of like a waffling answer. I don't think I heard yes or no. I think it's been unfortunate that, and I've said this over and over again, that's why I'm so appreciative of this debate and discussion. I want to keep the focus on issues, and in the Senate race, that's what I want it to be. And to the extent that the governor's race has taken away some of that focus, I think it has been a real shame, because I think these issues we're talking about are so important to people's lives. That's been my big disappointment. One final thing, Bob, since we're going to go to closing statements, is about being down on the country. I'm not down on this country. I mean, my father came over here as a Jewish immigrant from the Soviet Union, and he taught me what it was like to live in this country. I love this country. I just want America to be America again. And Rudy, I want this to be a country where all the people have opportunity, and where all the people are represented in government, not just the people with the clout. Too many people have been left out.
Paul, it almost sounded like you started your closing statement, but I don't think you did. No. Paul Wellstone won the coin toss before the debate began, and has asked...
Now, can I please respond to that?
Well, we're just about out of time. If you can make it in about 10 seconds, real quick.
Well, I think... well, we'll go to the closing statement.
All right. In that case, Rudy, you're first. You're first, Rudy, out there in Washington.
Well, I'm proud.
Minute and a half.
I'm proud to be in the United States Senate. I want to serve again. I love the state of Minnesota. I get to almost all 87 counties every year. When I first came to the United States Senate, inflation was 13%, interest rates were 21%, unemployment was up over 10%. The world was in disarray. Afghanistan had just been invaded. Our defenses were down. I think that as we enter the 1990s, the times really are very much better. Having said that, these have been some very, very frustrating days in the United States Senate. They really have. As I've often said, that watching laws being made, watching the budget process go forward is almost like watching sausage being made. It's not very pleasant. But the only time we really shine is when we're compared to other nations around the globe, when we're compared to those governments, and then indeed we do shine. My dad, and Paul has talked about his father, he was just amazed about America every time, because he really knew difficulties in life. He knew poverty as a young man, but real poverty in Europe in the last part of the last century, and how much we have progressed. And what a wonderful country this is. People are still lined up to get in. They're not lined up to get out of here. I think that America is the greatest. I want to return to the United States Senate. I think I've had a good impact, and I want to continue to do so. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, thank you, Rudy. Very nicely timed. I must congratulate you on that. Paul, you have a minute and a half now.
Okay. Well, I think Washington needs to be shaken up. I think big changes need to take place. I think all too often it's been people with the big bucks and all of the clout, and the vast majority of people have been left out. To me, Bob, leadership is not dividing people, but it's inspiring people to be their own best selves. And I think this decade of the 80s will be viewed by historians as a greed decade. Too much has happened that has to be changed. The abandonment of the environment, the abandoning of children, the transfer of farmland, the S&L sleaze, the HUD sleaze. We have to make major changes. And I want to go to Washington not just to go there, but I want to go there to be a major leader in this change and to introduce major legislation in health care, economic opportunity for citizens. I want to be right there protecting the environment. I want there to be some fairness in the tax system, and there isn't right now, with middle and working people squeezed and the people on the top getting away like bandits. I want campaign finance reform, so that each person counts as one and no more than one, so that the wealthy don't dominate. And I want to see privacy rights and choice for women. And finally, I see a new world in the making. I see all kinds of possibilities of ending this insane arms race, ending this expenditure of money on weapons of death and destruction, and investing in people right here in our country and in the world. Not a heaven on earth, but a better earth on earth. I think we can do that in this decade of the 90s.
Thank you, Paul Wellstone, and thank you, Rudy Boschwitz, for joining us for this debate.
Thank you.